Bylaw for Toronto. I'm Christy Abraham with the city's communications team. Just to give you a quick rundown, we'll first hear from Councillor God Perks, and then we will have a presentation from Kamal Gogna, who's the interim chief building official and executive director of the city's Toronto Building Division. And then we'll also hear from Mayor Chow and Councillor Fletcher. And finally, we'll take questions right at the end. All right, now over to Councillor Perks.
Thank you. This is a very important day for Toronto tenants. For too long, tenants in the city of Toronto have been at risk of losing their homes through false renovations, or renovictions as people call them. Today, we're launching the work to get to council this month a bylaw that would protect the rights of tenants against these renovictions. In a moment, you'll hear from our chief building official, Kamal Gogna, who will walk you through the technical details. But I just wanted to talk for a moment a little bit about how we got here. For years, city councilors have been hearing from tenants in desperate straits who get an eviction notice because the landlord says they need to renovate. And in our housing market, that can mean being forced to move out of the city or becoming homeless. It's been a cruel and unfair and unjust way of treating people in the city of Toronto who rent their homes. Thanks to the efforts of all kinds of community activists and led by Councillor Fletcher, who you'll hear from later on today, the City of Toronto is introducing a bylaw that will put a stop to that. I'm now just going to turn it over to Kamal Gogna, who will tell you the technical details of how we're achieving this very important protection of rights for tenants in the City of Toronto.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's media briefing. Today, we're excited. The city is excited. Staff are excited as we unveil the details regarding the implementation of the renovation, implementation of a rental renovation license bylaw to address renovictions. Today, next slide, please. Thank you. Today, we'll provide a brief background to highlight the issue of renovictions in Toronto, provide an overview of the design of the renoviction bylaw, provide you with a high-level information on the public engagement which took place, which was critical to getting us to this stage in the development of the bylaw, and we'll leave some time for questions and answers as well. Next slide, please. By way of introduction, let's first define what do we mean by renovictions. A renoviction is an illegitimate eviction by a tenant, of a tenant by a landlord, claiming that the need for vacant possession for the purposes of renovations. It can include refusing tenants' return to the unit after renovations are completed, illegally raising rents for new or returning tenants, or not undertake major renovations at all following the eviction. This report that we're here to discuss today addresses the growing trend of renovictions within Toronto. We're trying in this bylaw to balance the need to address the misuse of renovations as an excuse for evictions, with the need for legitimate renovations, maintenance, and repair work that is necessary quite often, to address the aging and existing rental stock. In June of this year, City Toronto Council directed staff to report on and develop a bylaw to address renovictions modeled after the City of Hamilton approach. This approach was presented to residents of Toronto and landlords across the city through a detailed engagement process. And I'll talk about that more in the next slides. Accordingly, the city prepared a draft bylaw along with a staff report, which the Planning and Housing Committee will consider for adoption next week and refer it to council. In the staff report, city staff are recommending the adoption of the adoption and implementation of the Renoviction bylaw in Toronto to preserve the rental stock, to protect tenants, and like I said earlier, to preserve the affordable rental units within Toronto. Next slide, please. The Renoviction bylaw is enacted under the authority of the City of Toronto Act. It will not impact the Toronto Building's responsibilities for regulatory oversight under the Building Code Act to issue building permits. Building permits will continue to be issued where applicants demonstrate compliance with the Building Code Act, Building Code, as well as applicable laws. Next slide, please. This slide describes when N13 notices can be served under the Residential Tenancy Act, which is a provincial piece of legislation. Recent amendments to the Residential Tenancy Act through Bill 97 required that an N13 notice for repair or renovations be accompanied with a report from a qualified person confirming the need for vacant possessions. However, the province has not yet enacted provisions through regulations, nor has it defined what a qualified person is. This gap in legislation is in part addressed by the Toronto Renoviction bylaw. However, similar to Hamilton bylaw, Toronto's proposed bylaw will not prevent landlords from issuing N13 notices, nor does it permit the city to intervene in matters that are covered under the Residential Tenancy Act or the Landlord Tenant Board. Next slide, please. The purpose of a Renoviction bylaw is to require certain things to occur before a renovation license is issued to a landlord or an operator, including key items listed on this slide, such as landlords and tenants needing to agree on a tenant accommodation or compensation plan, and a copy of an approved building permit. More details on these elements is available within the report as well. The bylaw covers all rental units in Toronto with limited exceptions. If approved by City Council, the Renoviction bylaw will come into effect on July 31st, 2025. Next slide, please. A rental license, one of the key items of the Renoviction bylaw, is that a rental renovation license must be applied for by a landlord or an operator within 7 days. Sorry, mistake there. Within 7 days of the issuance of an N13 notice. This slide describes the information that must be accompanied with the license application for the city to consider the application. Again, more details are available on this information within the report. Next slide. The bylaw is designed to be clear, flexible for both tenants and landlords of various scales. The referenced accommodation and compensation plan will be required for the duration of the work. should the tenant choose to return to the unit following the renovation. Where tenants and landlords cannot agree on a plan, the bylaw permits the landlord to choose the financial compensation as described within the bylaw. An alternative accommodation or financial compensation plan, like I said, is required for the duration of the work. Next slide, please. Throughout the engagement, one of the things that we heard loud and clear from tenants was that they wanted to be involved, they wanted to be kept informed throughout the life cycle of a renovation license and building permit application. As a result, landlords are required to notify tenants of the submission of an application following their submission to the city, and post a tenant information notice following the acceptance of the application by the city. The city would provide that information notice to the landlord for posting. The city will then also provide a copy of the preventing evictions in Toronto handbook to the tenant. We will also create a publicly accessible registry through which tenants and landlords can be kept apprised of the status of the license application, similar to what we currently have for building permit applications. Next slide. In terms of enforcement, this slide describes the strategies that the city will adopt in enforcing the proposed bylaw. We propose to take an education first approach, educating tenants and landlords of their rights and obligations under the new bylaw, and encourage compliance. But I'd like to highlight also that the bylaw also provides for authority for investigations and graduated enforcement where appropriate. The report contains more information on the details of these tools and the need for additional resources to enforce the bylaw as well. Next slide. With respect to public engagement, this was a critical component that was necessary to develop the bylaw and get us to this stage. This slide describes the public engagement which staff undertook between mid-August and late September to gain feedback on how the implementation of the bylaw should look like with Torontonians. And main takeaways for us was that tenants and landlords both agreed that the city needed to develop multilingual guidelines that provide, and provide supporting documents that were clear and explicit and easy to understand throughout the implementation process, to make it easy for them to comply with the provisions of the bylaw. We also heard that there was broad support from tenants for the Renoviction bylaw within Toronto. And we also heard from landlords who voiced some concerns with the additional administrative and financial burdens that they would be required to undertake to comply with the provisions of the bylaw. The staff report contains 2 documents which outline details of the feedback that we received, and that's available online today. Next slide, please. And finally, as I mentioned previously, if Planning and Housing Committee and City Council approve the proposed Renoviction bylaw, the bylaw will go into effect on July the 31st. Thank you. I would like to now call on Mayor Shao to the podium, please, to speak. Thank you.
so good to welcome some of our guests here. It's a member of ACOR, Marcy Earl Berry and Alejandra. Yes. And Laura from Don Valley Community Legal Services. Kelly Wilson also, yeah, you're here too. I want to thank all of you being here, but especially Councilor Paula Fletcher for her advocacy on this for many years. Yeah, it is hard work, right? Since 2019, it was a long time. And Councilor Perks for his leadership on the Planning and Housing Committee. Members of, and all the city staff that have done tough work. It's yes, it's easy for us to speak, right? But I just got too excited, This is a case of the city staff listening to tenants, counselors, and reputable landlord, and coming together to craft a bylaw. This bylaw will protect tenants from needless evictions. It will end the practice of using renovations as an excuse to evict tenants so that they could escape the rent control law. And then they would jack up the law, the rent, and the poor tenant occasionally will become homeless. Renovations, yes, but evictions, no. I lived in St. Jamestown in an apartment building for many years, and my dad lived in there from 1970 to 2010, or there was decades. There have been lots of upgrades in his apartment. The balcony was upgraded, the carpet was upgraded, the elevators were upgraded, the lobby was upgraded, but at no time did he need to be that he needs to vacate his apartment. You don't really need to vacate the apartment for most of the renovations. So those landlords that are using renovations as an excuse to evict people, you can't get away with it now. So it's really important to protect our housing stock, because my family, working class immigrant family, the reason why we were able to survive is because the rent was reasonable. It was protected by rent control. And we know that 50% of Torontonians are renters, that 50% of people are susceptible to a renovictions. And landlord tenants law is provincial. And we've been calling the provincial government to have real rent control on all units, but that's not the case. Rent control on vacant units, right? It would then remove the incentive to renovate. That could end renovictions overnight. But the province have not stepped up. They have not acted. So the city, with the leadership of the councillors here, are stepping in to protect renters. This strong renovation bylaw put the onus on the landlord to try to evict and remove the tenants. It asked the landlord to demonstrate that they are renovating in good faith, and that will offer the unit back to the tenant. And I am very glad this is moving forward. So just thank you for our staff. It's going to make a huge difference in protecting the existing stock. I just saw another tenant advocate, counselor, and our speaker, Francis Nunciata, is also here. Thank you for joining us. So, yes, some of you may have some questions. Councillor, I think Councillor Fletcher, we need to hear from Councillor Fletcher because she's done so much work to make this possible. Councillor Fletcher, come on up.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I have worked on this for a long time. And it's so important that we're protecting housing. But I didn't work on this by myself. I certainly had a lot of help. And in 2019, we set up the Committee for the Protection of Affordable Rental Housing. And Councillor Perks, you were on that committee. And there were so many tenants that came there. The Housing Secretariat supported it. And we set that up because there was a renoviction in my ward on Langley, and we stepped in to try to stop that, where an investor bought a place with 25 units. We weren't successful. Another one on Logan, an investor bought that, 25 units. We weren't successful. We're successful on a little one in Salmon with 11 units. So every one of these units that we lose, you think 50 people moving out where are they going? And these were just investors saying, well, I want to get more from that property. This was the problem that we were facing. The real heroes in this story are all the tenant activists that have stayed on this for years and years. And you heard about who they are, but I want them to come up here with me today because this is our bylaw. This is not just the city's bylaw. Come up, please, because the mayor has already introduced you, but this is what we've worked on now for 5 years. Not been easy, but never giving up in order to get this great bylaw done. Come on and stand over here, please. So who was there then? Don Valley Legal's always been there. The Federation of Metro Tenants has always been there. Acorn has always been there. We've had lawyers, we've had activists in order to keep this moving. And you, Councillor Perks, are part of that committee because you made deputations regularly at this committee, and then it kind of puttered out. But with Hamilton and our new mayor, and I want to thank you, Mayor, for saying you gave this the green light because housing, yes, you did. Housing is so important to you, and losing unit after unit after unit that we really can't replace. It costs about $500,000 to build a new apartment. Let's keep people in the apartments that they have, where they've been there for quite a long time. So I really want to commend you for bringing this to fruition here, along with all of the city staff. Basically, there are already rules about what you can do about renovations and what you should do and who can do what. But unfortunately, there are people that want to break those rules. And as I mentioned, when investors decide, I'm going to buy that property, I'm going to get everybody out of there, I'm going to triple the rents, gee, I'm going to make a lot of money. That's not the city that we're looking for. We're looking for the city where the landlord says, I'm going to keep those people, I'm going to refurbish those apartments. So there's a way to do it and keep people in an apartment. And there's a way to do it where you're trying to kick people out in order to make more money. And I'll have to say the majority of landlords in the city, they're just following the rules. They're doing it the right way. They're saying, I'm coming in to fix your kitchen cabinets. It might be a day where make an arrangement, just like any of us would do wherever we live. But those that say, as they did on Salmon, I'm changing your bathroom, I'm changing your kitchen cabinets, and you need some new lights. I need this vacant in order to do that. Well, that should be considered rule breaking. That's what we're out to stop, to keep people in affordable rental apartments throughout this city. So we are making it harder to break the rules. And for those who follow the rules, thank you very much, because we support you for following the rules in this city. So you've heard how it's going to happen technically, but we'll also be making sure that this gets through City Council, and that when that bylaw is actually finally in full effect in June, that we're making good use of it. But until that time, we're going to be watching all the time, because all of us, I'll say, have files of people that are currently being renovicted from their homes. And let's not forget, these are their homes. So this started here, then went to Hamilton. Now it's come back here. But the really good news is, and I want to thank our staff so much for thinking ahead, is that not only have they been preparing this bylaw here, they've been in touch with other cities, with London, with Guelph, with Ottawa, to say, let's have these rules throughout Ontario. Because remember, the N13, the city doesn't give the N13 that says, I need a vacant possession. It's the Landlord and Tenant Board, which is a provincial body. So this is just shoring up our ability to make sure when that Landlord and Tenant Board gets an N13, nobody's fudging, nobody's cheating. They actually do need that because they have a building permit that says, I'm taking down these walls and I'm doing this work. That means can't stay, but also our new bylaw will make sure that tenants know, well, you might have to move, you can come back. And guess what? At the same rent. So this is what we're doing here in the city. And I just want to thank everybody for years and years of work to get us to today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well needed, well said.
Thank you, Councillor. We now take some questions.
Sorry, and if you could please state your name and the media outlet that you represent before you ask a question.
Hi, Matthew Bingley, Global News. On the timing of it, it doesn't come into effect until the end of next July, and I'm just wondering why that's the case when you talk about all the work that's already been done and what, aside from keeping an eye on people, what exactly are you going to do to make sure that there's not just a rush on people, renovicting people to get ahead of these rules?
So thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. In terms of why between now and July 31st, one of the issues is while we've been busy, we've had a very short window to prepare this bylaw, but since June to now, the bylaw is prepared. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done, a lot of administrative work that still needs to be done, whether it's developing application forms, just as a high level thing, or whether it's developing the implementation framework, how this is going to roll out. That work still needs to be conducted. Resources still need to be finalized. Staff training on how this bylaw will be enforced still needs to be developed. So a lot of work behind the scenes still needs to take place, and we are going to complete that work between now and July, including the development of the registry. That is a key element of this report.
Aside from the anecdotal instances of this happening, do you have any clear data on just how frequent these illegitimate renovictions are actually happening?
So in 2022, I believe, I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I believe in 2022, there was approximately 1,500 evictions that were filed with the province. We don't have the exact numbers. One of the reasons is that there's a lot of this activity does occur and it goes unreported. The bylaw that we're proposing will allow us to collect this data and report out it in future years. Sorry, 15,000 N13s were issued across the province. But that is what was reported. There's still a lot of activity that goes unreported.
Hey,
Many, you see these big towers, rental towers. This is not something that really happens in rental towers of that kind. These are smaller buildings, 1 or 2 or 3 people. Dealing with one right now where it's 6 units. The landlord said he was selling it. 4 people moved, left 2 people behind. And now we're going second time to the landlord and tenant tribunal. So this renovictions bylaw would very much help tenants that find themselves in those places. And I think maybe at City Council, we'll just have to look at what stopgap measure we're going to put in between now, when we're approving this, and when it's fully implemented, so that people feel that there's a landing pad, that they're not working without a net all the time. What safety net can we give without the full Renovictions bylaw?
Hey, Victoria Gibson, Toronto Star. Just building off the question on data, question for Kamal. The report says that the available data makes it hard to predict how many licenses you might receive applications for, but then gives an estimate of 160. Can you give a bit of clarity on how you landed on that number?
The 160 is the number that we obtained for 2023. And that data is published, that data is available. However, like I said earlier, that there's a lot of activity that goes unreported in this area. And as we move forward with the implementation of this bylaw, one of the key elements of the bylaw is to have the ability to collect this data. And currently we are making provisions based on the 160, whether it's on the resourcing front, whether it's on the implementation front. But we'll monitor and we'll keep an eye on this and come back with additional information as it becomes available.
And then just about the
Sorry, can I just add to that? Because just for numbers, but really and truly, when this has been implemented in other places, when you're looking at what you can do today on your N13, you can just say, I need a vacant apartment, give it to the tenant, then onus is on them. They have to take the landlord to the landlord and tenant board. They have to do all these things. Generally, people think, oh, I think I should just get out of here while the getting's good. But once you have to spend $750, once you have to hire an architect, once you have to go to the buildings department, once you have to get a building permit, then you really, really, really need to have a vacant unit. You're not using it as an excuse. And I think that's the beauty of the Renovictions bylaw, that it stops things even before they start if it's a good bylaw.
one other quick follow-up, the average market rents. In the report, it says the payments to tenants will be based on post 2015 average market rents. Why was that date chosen, and why not 2023 market rents?
I'm going to refer this to staff.
I'm Ted Van Vliet. I'm the project director for Renovictions Bylaw. Thank you for the question. The post-2015 rent was chosen because it is the most up-to-date rent that is available through CMHC. We're using CMHC rents because they're publicly available. They're collected from a reliable source, and we want to make sure that we have the most up-to-date information available to calculate that differential.
I would like to ask you, like, how long it's gonna take effectively to follow this law, and is there any potential risk like following this law, kind of thing? My name is Bibisha from Abra HD Canada. So I would like to ask you a question, like, how, while like following this law, how long it's gonna take to follow this law in a proper way, and is there any potential risk like while following this law, like regarding the rentals, bonus, and
Thank you for the question. Between now and July 31st, Toronto Building will be engaged in public communications and public education as well. So the bylaw is proposed to come into effect July 31st, 2025. In terms of risks, I'm not envisioning any risks. The landlords and operators will still continue to be able to get building permits under the Building Code Act, and this is an added provision where and only where landlords issue an N13 notice are they required to comply, needing to comply with these additional provisions of the Renoviction bylaw.
Hey everyone, Aiden Schmandy from the Trillium. This one's for Mayor Chow on a slightly different topic, but still housing related. So yesterday we got news that the feds in the province are in kind of another spat about the $250 million for encampment funding. The Fed said that they are going to talk to you directly. I'm wondering if you've been contacted by the feds yet about that.
Not yet, but we're ready because we are so ready. We need the funds to create respite center, more shelters, maybe even some rapid housing so we can build supportive housing. We know that without housing, without shelter, it's very difficult to get back on your feet. And you see the encampments, you see people that are in winter is slowly coming, but it's coming. So we can't wait. The funds, the federal government funds were designed in a way that it has to be matched with the province. And that's probably one of the reasons why it's stuck. I don't know because we're not there. We're willing to engage. We're willing to put up some of our funds. We're willing to move ahead because already the funds is not that much. Let's be honest about it. If I have my way, I would like to have that encampment and shelter funds, the homelessness funds, that would enable us to hire more staff to move people from tents to shelters. What we also want to do is to provide rent subsidy so that we can move people out from shelter to good housing, permanent housing, affordable housing. We would like to supplement the rent, and we would like to do more than 300 families or household or individuals per month. And if we can get 600 per month, you will see the shelters not being so full, so packed right now. You will see that they wouldn't be turning away people for 200 people per night. And it's desperate out there. So there are tents that are now all over the city because all our shelters are full. So no, we haven't been approached yet. However, maybe we will approach them to say we're ready to be your partner.
First kind of federal provincial we've seen over housing funding in the last few months, there was the 357
that
million.
Unfortunately not. The Canada Ontario Housing Benefits, and that ended in April. And for 6 months, we could not provide rent supplement to people to move from shelters into housing. And on average, each month, we used to, between January to end of March, 300 or 400 people, household per month. For 6 months, we were not able to do anything. So that's 1,800 household that we are not able to house. Why? Because the federal and the provincial government were arguing as to who should pay what. And finally, the deal got signed. We got a letter, and as in mid-October, that program is starting again. But for 6 months, it was stuck where people, 1,800 households, could not get decent housing because of it. So it's a bit frustrating. As you can tell from my voice. But anyway, any other questions? No?
I have a question. Beth McDonnell, CTV News. I just have a question. We're dealing with bad actors here for the most part with these N13. So, there's a lot on the landlord now to cough up a lot more money, moving expenses, the rent gap, and this fee. So how can someone explain how you're going to get all this money from the landlord into the tenants' pockets to actually pay to live at that temporary place while the place is being renovated?
Thank you for the question again. Part of the process that we will be undertaking to issue a renovation license is there will be need for tenants and landlords to provide confirmation that those expenses have been received prior to the issuance of a renovation license.
Okay, great. And then
I'm just going to follow up on that, Beth, because part of this bylaw really is to just, if you have to do all those things, get your renovation license, go to the architect, spend all that money, get a building permit. If anybody's done building, you know, it's a very long process to get that done. That means you really, really need to have vacant possession. But this is to discourage those who can just get that form, which you could get today, and mark off that you need it vacant. You don't have to have any proof that you need it vacant. You just give it to the landlord and tenant board and hope your tenant doesn't appeal it. So this is now a layer of protection that was not there before. And where this has happened, the number of actual renovictions rather than proper renovations has plummeted. That's what we know from BC. Yeah, if you're not serious about it, you don't have to spend any money thinking, oh, okay, I didn't really want to do that in the first place. But if you're really serious about it, you have to do that anyway because you're doing structural work in the apartment.
Also, the landlord, if they are just laying down carpet in the apartment, or they are fixing the extra outside the balcony. I watched my dad's apartment, and I was living there for a while. Um, uh, Doing the kitchen, you know, you don't need for the tenants to leave, and that's how my dad was able to be there for several decades. And during that time, his apartment have gone through renovations. His entire building have gone through renovations, but at no point was he asked to leave, to vacate. He wasn't evicted because you could do a lot of renovations without having to leave. I'm fixing my bathroom right now in my house because it's very old, and do I have to leave? No. So there's no extra cost if you don't need to evict someone.
And so under this new bylaw, any tenant in the city of Toronto, if they're given this N13, they have the right to come back to that apartment with the fixes. Is there any, what is in place to make sure, like, again, we're dealing with bad actors, so how, this person could be out for a year and then someone else, the landlord could just put somebody else in the place. How is this?
Sure. So the N13 eviction notice is very specific and can only be issued under specific conditions, meaning that there's a change of use being proposed, there's construct renovations that are being proposed, etc. Where that is the case, yes, this bylaw applies. And as Councillor Fletcher and and Mayor Chow emphasized, there are protocols that in landlords and operators will need to follow, such as submitting a qualified engineer's report confirming that that construction that is being proposed indeed does require a vacant possession. One of the reasons why Toronto Building is leading this is Toronto Building has in-house expertise to be able to review and qualify those engineers' report. If all you're doing within the building is painting, and we receive something that's vacant possession is required, rest assured we're going to be asking a lot more questions. Why is that the case? And so there's an ability here for Toronto Buildings perspective to be able to review those reports and confirm the validity as to whether the issuance of a license in this case is actually appropriate to address your concerns.
Let's say, does the city find out?
Yes.
Like, so
yes.
If the city finds out, the landlord said I could move back, but now the landlord's saying I can't. Like, there's always, we're talking about the rigmarole that all these tenants are going through now with the landlord and tenant board. How are we not creating a system of more rigmaroles? It's just more steps for people to navigate as they deal with this.
So one of the provisions for the bylaw, it does include enforcement mechanisms, enforcement tools. When complaints are received that individuals are not following and the bylaw or the requirements of set forward, yes, there are provisions within the bylaw ranging from issuing of orders to tickets to prosecuting, and the fines could range from as minimum as 0, depending on the violation, to a judge fining someone up to $100,000, depending on the severity of the violation being addressed. So there are mechanisms within the bylaw that does address bad faith actors in this instance.
I think to clarify your question, this is an additional rigmarole. In order to get the license to do the renovation, there has to be that tenant plan, right? That's up front. So it's actually very easy to monitor whether or not the tenant plan is being met. Does that help?
Hi, Dilshad Burman, City News. I guess I'm gonna continue on a little bit with Beth's line of questioning. In terms of enforcement, we see a lot of great rules being put into place. How are we enforcing things in terms of, say, the tenant knowing when they're allowed to come back? Right now, all of the onus is on the tenant. They have to keep in touch with the landlord. They have to touch base like every month. Can I get back? Can I get back? Who is telling the tenant? And how are we ensuring that the tenant knows that now is the time for me to exercise my right of first refusal and get back in there? Who is doing that? How are we enforcing that?
Hi, thank you for the question. With respect to that, one of the things that we're proposing to do and that the bylaw allows us to do is to create a public registry so people can track online in real time from anywhere in the world how that renovation is going. There will also be a relationship to the building permit. So as the building permit works its way through the system, there's a different system that will report when that work has been complete as well. And then as part of the tenant accommodation or compensation plan, there would be documentation and some sort of security within that, a declaration that the landlord would maintain contact with the tenant and advise them once the work was complete and make the arrangements for that tenant to return.
The public registry, who's responsible for updating that? The landlord is self-reporting there, or how is that
It would
working?
be the city with the licensing data that we collect.
Just I can take one last question. Sorry, any more questions? Anyone? All right. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you.
Take down the address and it'll show up.